Times. Gillian, great to see you. And listening to Liz Truss saying, taxes are at a 70-year high, debt levels are historically looking manageable, and therefore we should be putting more money in people's hands. It's interesting, this is a counter-cyclical approach. So, making sure that there's more money in people's hands during bad times. From an economic theory perspective, what is the rationale behind this, and do you think that it is very risky?
Well, essentially, she's trying to grow her way out of the hole and working on the assumption that if she grows the economy rapidly, then essentially the debt burden will come down quite naturally. You'll bolster confidence, you'll get foreign investors coming into the UK and essentially giving the economy a kickstart. The problem, or the irony, is that even as she's trying to get more foreign investment into the UK and build confidence, the impact of this has been to actually smash international confidence in the UK's policymaking ability, not just because investors are worrying about the impact of higher debt, but also, most crucially, because people are starting to fear what exactly is a mechanism for policymaking, given that you have the Bank of England and the UK government seemingly at odds in a way that, frankly, we've not seen for decades. So it's not just the shock of the announcement that's really damaging investor confidence, it's shock over the shock.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is sort of what you're reading into it because it's evidence in the way the pound has been responding. And then I guess, we don't really know what conversations are happening in the background. But for us to understand, the BOE is trying to raise rates to ensure that inflation comes down. On the other end, you're taking money, you're putting money back in people's hands by cutting taxes. This might be counterintuitive, but, one could actually tell, as you say, they're trying to grow their way out of this problem. The international community is watching this very closely, saying, where to from here? From a practical perspective, do you think that there is method in this madness?
Well, I can certainly see her desperate hope that she can try and bolster growth in this way. But the problem is that she keeps saying, or rather Kwasi Kwarteng, the Chancellor, keeps saying, well, markets go up, markets go down, we don't need to worry. The problem is, though, that if you have a situation where international investors are essentially panicking and giving a vote of no confidence in a way that means that not only is sterling weakening dramatically, which of course will push up inflation, but also effectively interest rates are rising in the markets in a way that's going to make it a lot more expensive for anyone to borrow, not just the government, but also ordinary households and companies. All of that together can create a mood of panic and the type of stresses and tensions that will undermine what Liz Truss is trying to do in terms of giving a kickstart to the economy. And it's very telling that just this evening, the Financial Times website had a story about the fact that banks are essentially not offering mortgages anymore right now. They put a hold on new mortgages because of this sense of chaos and panic. People are starting to fear that the Bank of England will have to raise rates a lot higher than expected to try and protect the currency and to try and essentially bring some sense of financial responsibility and stability. And that, of course, would undermine the very thing that the government's trying to achieve.
So the markets want certainty, right? And the currency obviously wants the right messaging. It's an interesting barometer. What is the messaging that people need to hear from the BOE, and also the messaging, importantly, from government right now?
Well, I think people in the markets are keen to hear three things. Firstly, they want evidence that the Bank of England and the Treasury are, if not working together, because they can't work together, the Bank of England is independent, but at least not working in direct opposition to each other in terms of their policy making, because that is a concern in the markets right now. Secondly, what the markets and investors are really concerned about were the comments over the weekend from Kwasi Kwarteng, essentially indicating that there could be more tax cuts coming pretty soon. So the fear is that essentially, having had this big, dramatic so-called mini budget, which was anything but miniature, that's caused so much concern, that essentially you're going to see even more fiscal hole emerge later on when the government keeps cutting taxes further. And so what people are looking for is some kind of sense that there's going to be responsibility and a limit in what's actually happening, and some sense of predictability. You say that markets like certainty. Well, investors know they're never going to get
Yeah.
certainty, but they do like to have some kind of sense of a predictable framework. So it's a shock over the shock that's really hurting people right now.
Yeah, I'm looking at what the pound is doing, levels that we haven't seen since 1985. And I guess many people are saying, how much of this is going to be priced in once things settle and they understand what government policy is going to be the real impact. What is the sense in terms of how low the pound can go?
Well, no one knows, obviously. If the pound was to go below parity with the dollar, I think that would give a very big
Yeah.
psychological shock, not just to the markets, but to ordinary Brits. Because remember, it wasn't so long ago that the pound was essentially $2. So you've seen a very, very dramatic decline in the value of the pound and the British economy in a fairly short space of time. So, all bets are off if this chaos continues. I certainly very much hope it does not. And it's worth stressing one more thing. The type of carnage, the speed at which we've seen the currency collapse in the last week or so
Yeah.
really is more loss of confidence than what we saw even after Brexit or after the so-called Black Monday when Sterling left the ERM. So it really is shocking by the standards of history.
Yeah. And unprecedented. Gillian, thank you very much. Great to see you.